dust these babies off. So satisfying. I've done a video on how to instant ambient with the OPZ in the past. I've also done a comparison between the Digitone and the OPZ, but I haven't done an ambient video combining the Digitone with the OPZ, and thus, here we are. What I've discovered recently is that this combination is really strong for calming, ambient, like therapeutic music. In fact, I already have a goal in mind to live stream with this combo along with the microcosm. Chain a really long sequence with the OPZ and just let it run for like the entire day. That way people could drop in if they want like some ambient and chill background music. I'd like to remind anyone who's ever tempted to buy gear on this channel, I'm sure it happens pretty often, considering that you're here. I leave purchase affiliate links in the description of all of my videos. So there's one for the Digitone as well as the OPZ. In this video, I encourage you to use those links if you'd like to support this channel. Also, shout out to MyVolts if you're looking for very aesthetically pleasing cables. These ones in particular are called Candy Cords. I especially like that they are coil. It just gives you a lot more leeway if you need to extend it to another piece of gear, or if you're walking around the room, playing guitar, something like that. And these are designed specifically to connect synths or pieces of gear. Aesthetically, they're very pleasing. At the time of filming this is actually the last day of their Kickstarter. So yeah, keep an eye out for them. MyVolts Candy Cords. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna leave this right here. Ooh. So let's get right into the setup. There's a few tricky things to take note of before actually making some music. The music making part is a bit more instant than the setup, which is not instant ambient. If you're already a whiz when it comes to syncing, or if you just like to skip ahead to the music creation creative part of this video, timestamp in the description. For those of you who are interested, this is a pretty specific setup and I just wanted to document it here on YouTube. So in terms of audio, if you have a double 1/4 inch to 3.5 millimeter, come on, you're good to go with these. In fact, this is probably the best option. But if you want, you could go 3.5 millimeter to 1/4 inch mono. Function and LFO to head to the master track, and here you have your volume control. So I have left and right here. If I want, I can bring this down or up. I'll just leave it around 70, let's say. I can apply effects here as well, so chorus, delay, and reverb, which we will definitely be using. There's also an overdrive. Let's just play this through the track that's on the OPZ. Next step is MIDI and USB. Because we're syncing these, we want a MIDI clock. So one of these becomes the master or the timekeeper, the other one becomes the receiver or the slave. So this is something that you can go either way with, but I'm choosing the OPZ to be the master. The main reason being that there's only 4 tracks on the Digitone, so you're quite limited. There's 8 tracks on the OPZ. In terms of cables being used for this, I just have a regular USB A to B, and then here I have a tiny little USB-C cable adapter to go into the OPZ. So before you hit me in the comments saying that I could use the OP Lab for this, actually, this is more reliable than the OP Lab for this particular setup, which is kind of ridiculous. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, I love Teenage Engineering gear, but it's just not reliable. You do have the option of using like an old school 5-pin MIDI cable, but then you'd have to have a MIDI hub to connect everything. So it just complicates things. From there, to sync the clock, we're gonna check out my iPhone here, which is connected to the OPZ via Bluetooth. So we're currently on the OPZ menu. We're gonna scroll over to MIDI setup. So just make sure that clock out enable is checked. So that ensures that the MIDI is going out of the OPZ. Over on the OPZ, hit save project, go to MIDI config, sync, and make sure that clock receive is checked, which it is. Transport receive is also checked, so if you press start or stop on the OPZ, that'll track on the Digitone. Okay, so MIDI, USB, clock, and audio is all set up. Now we want to send notes from the OPZ to the Digitone. Go to settings, MIDI config, port config. Make sure that input from and output to is MIDI and USB. Also, let's head down and choose receive notes. Make sure that's ticked, and make sure received CC is not ticked. We'll go back to settings, MIDI config again, channels. On the OPZ, these first 4 tracks are all drums. You could actually see it: kick, snare, hi-hat, and this is a perk. For most styles of music, you do need drums, in which case I would reconfigure these channels, but this is ambient music. So track 1 of the Digitone is configuring to track 1 here, track 2 is configuring to track 2, right? So we're essentially erasing the drums from all of these MIDI channels. And then of course we have these 4 melodic channels, so bass, lead, arpeggio, as well as chords. That'll be played through the OPZ. So to be clear, first 4 tracks, we're sending signal to the Digitone. Second 4 tracks, that's all coming from the OPZ, 8 tracks in total. So definitely plenty of ingredients for grandma's hot ambient lasagna. Now that this setup is out of the way, it's time to make some ambient. Track 1, we're gonna head over to chord on the OPZ, and I'll make it 8 bars long. Let's run through some of these chord tones. That's pretty ambient sounding. I'm gonna press play, we'll turn the click on. Let's write something in. I'm going to quantize that right away. Maybe some reverb. I'll head over to kick, and you'll notice that you hear the kick. Right, so we can't have that. So we'll go over to the volume of the kick. Let's lower that to 0. And now all you hear is the Digitone. This tone is cool already. I like this tone. The question is, does it work with what we already have? So let's audition something. That could be cool. We're gonna go back to the chord note. I already know it's too loud. I'm gonna lower that a bit. Head back over to the kick, so the Digitone part. We'll stick to that tone. I'm gonna make this a 7-bar pattern. I'm not gonna think too much about it. I'm just gonna record something in. So let's play it. Nice and sparse. Let's roll on over to OPZ bass. I already know I want to keep this sparse as well. That's not it. Nope. Let's make this a 9-bar pattern. So we have all these weird odd time things going on. And I'm going to treat this bass as more of a melodic thing and not so much like a bass note thing. Bear with me here, this doesn't sound great at this point, but we're gonna make it all work together. Don't worry. For the second track on the Digitone, oof, okay, so we definitely have to mute that snare. Okay, let's head over to track 2. That could be cool, but let's tone search a little bit. That's cool. Tryptamine BR, I like that. We'll stay in that realm. So this is a lead. Let's go over to filter, and I'll filter out lead. Here we go. Okay, I like that little click, click, like ambient. Let's choose that. So let's go with that one. Yes. Here we go. Quantize that. Turn that click off. Let's go back to the Digitone on that sound specifically and go over to chorus. Maybe change the depth and speed. Let's mess around with that. I already really like the way that these patterns are kind of rubbing off of each other in different ways. So instead of having like an 8-bar pattern where everything is square and loops at the same time, there's just a lot more depth and character to this, especially when it comes to ambient music. So we're dealing with polyrhythms at this point. I'm not even sure when all of these sequences would loop back on beat 1. This technique is a secret ambient weapon. I use it on all of my ambient tracks. So this is super sparse, and believe it or not, I think that this is enough to work with in this ambient track. Speaking of secret weapons, let's talk about the next thing, OPZ trigs. You can add a trig to any of the notes that we just programmed, and that includes the notes coming from the Digitone as well. And this is so dope. So we only have 3 tracks, right? We have the first track here, Digitone, second track, and then third track on the OPZ. So let's go over to this one. First thing we'll do, hit Shift, select all of the notes. And I'm going to choose this trig right here, which is velocity, hit 0, which means random. So now all of these notes will play at a random velocity. I'll do the same thing with all of the notes in all the other patterns as well. The next trig we're going to use is skip, so you could actually select specific notes within the sequence and make it skip as many times as you want. So let's choose these 2 notes, for example. This is the trig, and it'll skip every second time, or maybe third time. So now these notes will skip 2 times out of 3. Back to a Digitone track, I'm going to choose this note and make it stutter randomly. Let's hear what that sounds like now. We'll go back to the Digitone track. I'm going to choose this note, the only note in the sequence, and I'm going to choose this here, which means that it'll change the note every time that it plays. You could choose the range as well. If you want it to be super random, like a very high range of possibility, you go 0 or 9. We'll go 2. I find that for this particular trig, if you choose like something that's too random, it takes you out of the track. And then for my absolute favorite part, there's this feature right here. This is kind of like a performance feature. In fact, if I pull out my phone again, so I'll just slip this in right here and I'll play the pattern. And these are the different effects that I'm adding to the track. I feel like this might actually be a little bit too sparse, so here's what I'll do. Tempo, what are we at right now? Let's make it 120. So we'll focus on this one right here, which is the random feature. It randomizes the notes that are playing in the OPZ. And if we want, we could actually record this effects in and make all of the notes that play random all the time without even having to touch the OPZ. So let's do that. I'm going to hit record and I'm just going to hit random. This is oftentimes a nice contrast against the notes in the Digitone that are not changing. So there's still a sense of being grounded in the key. You're not just like totally in space with random notes. So as you can see, this setup really is limitless. If you're going into ambient land, of course, the microcosm is another great tool for that. This is the combo that sparked the idea of live streaming a set and just keeping it going forever. Keep in mind that this is just one pattern. If we want to chain several patterns together, the OPZ is killer at sequencing. If we want, we could easily just copy this pattern over and add slight or maybe major variation to create a full ambient track. And most importantly, an ambient track that plays itself. And it's really not that difficult to set up. Just use this as an outline. That is a lot of info for you guys, so I think we're gonna cap it off at that. Hopefully this video gave you guys some inspiration and insight on how to ambient in general, more specifically with the OPZ and the Digitone. If there's one thing to take away, I would say that odd time sequences is the way to go. Shout out to MyVolts and their new product Candy Cords, these little guys here. I've left a link for that in the description as well, so make sure to check that out. I hope that you subscribe, and that's all, folks. See you soon.